All right. I think we should be synced up now.
Perfect.
I don't know if it does. Discord doesn't like to pick up the claps. I ran into
Yeah.
this issue with coffee.
I've also noticed that.
I ran into that issue with coffee, and we went around and around in circles for like 3 minutes, just being like, why wasn't there a clap?
I've started to just sort of intuit, like, okay, I'm going to just trust that they clapped. Like, if nobody says, wait, I fucked up,
yeah,
then I'm just going to assume that we're good.
Just believe that it has been achieved correctly.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just glad that it's not like, I don't know if you were doing any podcast stuff, like, even just like 5 years ago, where like the delay between the two people would start to drift throughout a conversation. Oh god,
yeah, I remember that.
So you would have to listen to the whole thing.
I remember that also with early like recording programs like Fraps as well would do that.
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah. Sometimes the frame rate would dip
over time.
Yeah,
no
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we're beyond that, thankfully.
Yeah.
But hello there, and welcome to a new episode of Beyond the Wire, with me, your host, DEMENZA of the Gate. This is one of the rare occasions where there's a good chance you might not actually know me, but hello and welcome to my show, where I sit down with other and there he is, right on cue.
No, it's
That's
great.
Big
It's
Mac.
perfect.
He's decided to appear and say hi. He's my special guest here, but in addition to Big Mac, there's also another special guest, which is Hazel, the hit anime YouTuber. Hello, Hazel.
Hello. Thanks for flying me all the way in first class. Really appreciate the hospitality.
Of course.
I'm back in my home in the Bay Area, if that's the thing I'm allowed to say.
Oh, that you originate from the Bay Area?
No, that you're in the Bay Area.
Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah. Cool.
I'm in the Bay Area, but outside of San Francisco, thank God.
Yeah, thank God.
Because that city just like pollutes people's minds for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But I always forget you're from the Bay Area originally.
Yeah, I'm from about 40 minutes out from San Francisco.
Oh, really? Are you just like
Sonoma County?
Sonoma County.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see.
It always makes it sound a little cushier than it actually was, because like Sonoma proper is like an extremely rich area, but where I grew up, Petaluma is not quite so much.
You were
more,
over in
shall we say,
Petaluma.
financially diverse. Yeah. It's got rich places. It's got poor places. I think it was considered one of the meth capitals of America for a while.
Oh, hell yeah.
Highs and lows.
That's great.
A place of contrast.
Yeah, sounds like a great place to live. That's
honestly,
for sure.
I never saw much of that, you know. I believe it, but I didn't necessarily see it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the Bay Area, you know, there are areas that have bad reputations, like Oakland and stuff, that you go to and they're like totally, completely fine. It's just
absolutely.
People who don't live there have a bad idea of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there are also like a lot of ways in which viewing like raw like crime numbers in metropolitan areas is like super. Like it's not like real data, you know? Like it creates a lot of false equivalencies to just kind of look at those raw numbers and compare them per capita. Yeah,
but I'm glad to have you with me here in on good old California time. Believe it or not, I think you are actually the first guest that has even been in the same time zone. So
I don't have.
You're the closest so far.
Yeah,
Congrats.
all of my online friends are in different time zones.
Everybody seems to be on the East Coast for some reason, or in Ireland in coffee's cake. Coffee's sake, not coffee.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, coffee's cake. It's perfect.
I can't speak tonight, apparently. But yeah, so generally I start these out by doing a general introduction. Normally it's to give the audience sort of an understanding of what it is you do. Mm-hmm. So why don't you just start by kind of explaining what it is you do, what kind of stuff you put together, all that.
You know, I've never had to answer this question before, so I don't have like a canned response.
That's fair.
I mean, I make YouTube videos about anime and things adjacent to anime. I also make music. What What else do I do? I like cooking. Doesn't really come up much, but that's why we're late to recording. I was cooking.
Yeah,
and I thought I would be done sooner than I was.
What were you putting together?
I was making a fucking I was making Swan La Fen, which is like a Chinese hot and sour noodle soup.
Oh, damn, that sounds nice.
Yeah, it was really good. Shouts out to Omnivore's Cookbook, whose recipe I used and modified to make it vegetarian.
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm a little... sorry, I don't mean to... I know that's not the answer that you were looking for, but yeah, I don't know. I make videos about...
Anything at all. Really, it's just to give sort of the audience kind of an understanding of who it is I'm sitting down with.
Yeah.
Granted, of the guests so far, you by far have the largest following so far.
Sure.
So let's be real. There's a lot of people that are going to go in knowing you, but even still, you know, you kind of do a lot of things. And they're all really good too, I should say. Thank you. I love the videos. Tasted my cooking. So. I have not tasted the cooking. That is true. So I can't say anything about that. It could be, it could just be the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Jury's still out.
The actual poison, but I'm sure it would still be better than my own, regardless. I can barely cook at this point. My girlfriend has handled it for so long that the only time I ever cook is when she's out of town. And when that happens, I create some truly horrific abominations, dog.
What's your worst?
I used to do this thing because I grew up very poor.
Right.
Something I related to in your the anime countryside video is you talking about the summers just sucking ass for anybody that doesn't have money.
Yeah.
But I used to do this truly dog shit horrendous thing to my body where what I would do is I'd make some white rice, and then I'd cook some ramen, and then I would plate the noodles on top of the white rice.
Whoa, carbs on carbs.
Carbs on carbs. And then normally I'd add some I'd add some meat or whatever I had that was that I could find in the freezer, the old freezer there. And that's like probably the worst dish I've ever created for myself. Truly an abomination. It's just carbs. Just like pure empty carbs. Well, rice has something in it, but it was that's probably one of the worst things I've done.
Yeah.
And then I used to have this habit of I'm a white boy who grew up in Minnesota, right? So I used to have a habit of I'd take a tortilla. And this is gonna be a crime, but I'd take a tortilla and I'd just put a shit ton of cheese in it, and then I'd microwave it.
Yeah. Oh no, I think everybody. I think everybody did that once or twice.
I did a lot more than once or twice. Let me tell you.
I mean, I had a girlfriend in high school who the first time I went over to her place, she was like, "Oh yeah, do you want like a lunch or whatever?" And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. She pulled out some flour tortillas and then put barbecue sauce in them and then microwaved them.
Oh no, yeah, that's already an immediate red flag.
Yeah. I mean, she was fine. We were dumb kids. But I think I kind of had the benefit of I grew up poor, but I also grew up with I grew up with a cultural background where you associate their poor food with their best food. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of was still eating good most of the time. So that came as a pretty big shock.
Yeah, it's definitely a whole thing. I have some stuff that I've held on to definitely from that time in my life. One of the things I still swear by is ketchup and macaroni and cheese.
See, I've never done that. I always go straight for hot sauce in my mac and cheese.
Hot sauce would also do the same thing, just be a little bit more spicy. So that's definitely not bad. But the reason I do it is because it's I didn't have fresh tomatoes. If I had fresh tomatoes, I just put that in. But as a kid, ketchup did it, and I still every so often, whenever I'm whenever I'm in the mood for just something horrible. Or just something that's not good food, but like, you know, it hits that spot.
Mac and cheese is still my go-to for like, I just fuck my shit up. just devastate me. Make me regret my last 48 hours.
It's between that and like, you know, eating fast food for me, like Taco Bell.
Right, yeah.
Which in fairness, I do exaggerate how much I eat Taco Bell, but it is also more than a person normally should.
How much would you say that you eat it, actually?
In recently, maybe once a month.
Yeah, same here. I try really hard to keep it to once a month.
But it used to be a lot worse than that. It used to be a lot worse.
Oh my god. We used to, when we were still in Southern California and we were stuck having to drive everywhere, one of the closest places for us to go and get food when we didn't have groceries, because we lived in a goddamn place where there were like a bunch of bad fast food options that were closer to us by like a bit than a grocery store. And you still had to drive like 20 minutes. But we would go out and we would get fucking Taco Bell like sometimes like multiple times a week. It was really fucked up.
Yeah.
But, now that I actually live in walking distance to my grocery stores, and I live in a place with good public transportation, thankfully I'm kind of de-incentivized from doing that sort of thing. So I don't eat out very much in general these days. I'm really grateful that that's the case.
Yeah, I've also just pretty much stopped altogether. There's a few things where, like, you know, Taco Bell will release some, like, disgusting item on the menu. Like the big Cheez-It thing that they did for a while.
Oh my god, I don't think I ever had that. I know what you're talking about, but I think I missed the boat on that one.
It is, I mean, as with most Taco Bell items, it's fine. Any of their limited release items are normally always, like, better than you would think, but not remarkable enough to ever talk about. Like that time they did wings for 1 week. That time nobody but me remembers. I feel like I'm insane because I remember it, but there was like a week period where Taco Bell did wings.
See, I think I do remember that, and I think I remember going, oh, well, that just kind of doesn't apply to me, so I can avert my gaze to that one.
I love wings, so
I did when I was a meat eater.
So I was just like, I gotta try it.
Yeah. Did they do like a quote unquote like Mexican style like wing sauce? Like what?
Oh no, it wasn't even trying. It was
like 7-Eleven wings.
Yeah, it was like 7-Eleven wings.
Yeah.
That's basically what it actually I would say 7-Eleven wings might be better. 7-Eleven wings are pretty good overall. They could be worse. They could be a lot worse coming from 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get stuck on food goblins forever. So I want to pivot over to talking about something much more respectable, which is I always ask this generally with people, but in your case, you kind of have two things you sort of got started with. But
sure.
Yeah, I'm curious how you got started kind of just making shit.
Yeah, so I actually have never had the excuse to talk about this in like a recorded format before. But like obviously, you know, like I've been making like dumb video stuff for a long time. I think I found out about YouTube at like age 11 and started making shit at like 12 on like accounts that are all long gone now. And I just like, you know, it was something that kind of came and went for me. It was always something that I really enjoyed doing. But at the start, it was just like, you know, like Let's Plays, stuff like that. Just generally like unscripted stuff. And then at a certain point, I just decided that I wanted to try making like scripted videos. I think I was pulling from stuff like Happy Video Game Nerd and like channels like that kind of early wave of like highly edited, kind of slightly conversational but still very tightly scripted videos about like video games and stuff like that. So that was what I kind of jumped into doing. And I at it was something that always kind of came and went. I didn't have a computer growing up, so I would have to make all of these and upload them in secret at my grandparents' place.
I see.
Yeah, so, and kind of inherently, I wasn't always going over there, so I couldn't always make stuff. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around in my timeline a little bit, but eventually I got a laptop and I was able to start making kind of scripted stuff. I did there were a few assignments that I got in high school that were make a PowerPoint presentation for blank, and I just made a shitty short film. So I kind of just liked making videos in a lot of different ways. I wouldn't even say I was a very big movie watcher at the time, so it's not like it was I'm gonna go to film school sort of thing. I was very much so just kind of learning the basics by being really bad at them for a long time. But when it comes to doing the stuff that I've been doing, it's almost a little hard for me to remember how I kind of got on the particular path that I did, but I stopped making videos for a good while. I just got busy with music and stuff like that, which I'll get to. But it was every now and again, you kind of encounter a piece of media, I think if you're so inclined to think about them this way, where you just feel this really intense, almost compulsion to speak about them where other people can hear it. And, every now and again, something like that would really strike me, and I'd be okay, it's time for me to make a video. And this would be every 3 to 6 months, they'd get a few thousand views, and then that would be that. And then I put out one that got I think it was 20,000 or something like that.
Yeah, I remember
kind of
there was
after the
one
fact.
that just sort of all of a sudden peaked out of nowhere. I don't remember which one that was, but I specifically
this was before I knew
that.
any of you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This was old stuff.
Oh,
that's gone now.
Because there's been a few times where there's just been a video that does really well for whatever reason.
Yeah. So I had that in the back of my mind, and it'll sound shrewd, but at the start of 2021, it became apparent that my wife and I were going to have to move out of our current living situation. And I knew that because we were, for some reason, paying a really small amount of rent because we were sharing a room in a house with a lot of other people. Even though we were in kind of a more expensive area of California, I was okay, we're gonna need to find something else. So I kind of looked at all of my options, and I started thinking about things, and I was all right, I think I'm going to just do a little bit of all of the things that I do, and whatever takes off first and becomes viable for me financially, I'm going to lean into that. So I started making videos again. And I decided to pick up an old video idea that I had about an anime that used to be popular once upon a time but had kind of fallen out of the public favor because I had read its manga the year prior, and it gave me a lot to think about. And I started really putting out my portfolio for doing audio engineering and for doing composition commissions for people. Scored a few gigs doing that, and I just kind of did a few other odds and ends like that. I almost can't even remember at this point some of the other things that I was doing to kind of push all of that further. I made an EP in a month, and then out of the blue, I uploaded my first of those kind of comeback videos, and it made an older one shoot up in views significantly. I think it was one of those instances where my sub count quadrupled by the end of it, I think I went from 2,000 to 8,000 over a pretty short amount of time. It was very overwhelming. It was it's something that you just kind of don't really know how to compartmentalize. And then I kept putting out more videos. I had with the Elfin Lead video, the one that I alluded to, I wound up getting that shout out from Super Eye Patch Wolf. Thank you so much to him. Extremely sweet guy. I had been DMing with him because we first met because I did the outro theme for his podcast. I'd been DMing with him like, hey, I am looking to make something about a piece of media that's pretty transgressive. Like, I'm kind of these two minds about how to go about it. So we had been talking in DMs about this for a while. When the video came out, I let him know, like, yeah, like, it got age restricted, but, like, whatever. Thank you so much for your help. And then the next thing I knew, you know, him and Brian, one of his podcast co-hosts, were talking about it on their podcast. They had a lot of really sweet things to say about it. And then he talked about it on his channel, and that was like a really big spike in views for me. A little bit after that, I had a video get like 500,000 views out of the blue. That video is now sitting at like 1.5 million, I think. I don't really look at that stuff too close these days. I might be over-exaggerating the amount that it has now, but at any point, it's over 1 million, which is insane. I try not to think about it.
Yeah, that is a very high number.
Yeah, and it was around that time I was phasing out my day job at a recording studio that I was working at. And I just kind of was at a point where I could go full-time. You know, it was really tight at first. Part of that was me kind of leaning on savings, but I kind of had a hunch that I was experiencing forward momentum, and that I could kind of continue on that trend. And turns out that was right, and I've been doing this for a living for, gosh, more than a year at this point, maybe a year and 6 months almost. And that's where I am with that. Music was just like, I got started kind of late. I picked up a guitar at 17. I started playing music with some musician friends of mine. I started recording for them, started a few labels with some other friends. We put out some music that we were all making, and that's kind of that. It's you know, it's weird to be in a position where I almost kind of assumed that my trajectory as a musician would be the thing that I would be thinking about more. But because that's kind of like the hobby that supplements my income and not the thing that I'm kind of putting my full focus onto, it's something that I almost think retroactively on as a hobby, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because that is kind of what it always amounted to, is it was a thing that I was doing in my free time and that I was really passionate about, and that I made some pocket change on every now and again. And now it's something a lot more, obviously, but it's still not the thing that I'm like doing full time. So yeah.
I mean that makes sense. I mean, for me, I feel I kind of fell into making videos more or less the same way. Just sort of did stuff every so often, off and on for like years. Did stuff for school, put together projects, would always go out of my way to make little, you know, dumb skits or whatever when I had a simple assignment, stuff like that.
Right,
and it sort of just eventually ended up where it's at. But yeah, it definitely is wild to have something like, you know, you said you were like doing the videos originally and weren't even really thinking about it as something that would like really take off and be something you could kind of use as your main rock. But
I mean, I think it was one of those things where I always had the how do I say it, like, I always knew it was an option, but I never, I don't think I ever expected it to happen, you know?
Yeah, I think that's...
Because the YouTube game is such that you can spend so long making fucking peanuts, you know? Yeah. I didn't see a cent off of what I was doing until things really started to take off.
That's kind of... I talked about it with Coffee kind of when we did ours, but... And you also mentioned it as well with like the eye patch wolf stuff, but there definitely is something where for a while, you know, you'll just kind of make stuff and really you're just waiting for it to all of a sudden take off. Maybe somebody gives
Right,
you a shout out or something like that. But unfortunately, like, YouTube itself isn't really good for creators in terms of like getting your stuff out there. If you're somebody who is like not a household name, the algorithm isn't gonna promote your videos, especially if it's on stuff that is, you know, challenging topics, or so much as even mentions, you know, anything queer related, anything even slightly challenging according to YouTube. Like it's hard to take off. So
I think that at the same time, and I say this solely because I don't want people to be discouraged, and not because I'm like, oh, well, it's not that bad. I think that when you make a lot of videos that don't necessarily get a lot of traction, I think it's easy to forget sometimes that that is a backlog for when something does take off. And the longer you've been going at it and the more that you have it in the backlog, the more you're going to see almost kind of an exponential reaction when one video does take off. You know, people are going to start finding their ways to the other ones if they like what they saw, especially if you have, like, you know, a particularly strong personality in what you do. And then it's suddenly like, oh shit, like, what are all of these other videos? And then I think this is something that we almost kind of take for granted when we look at other people's channels after they've kind of had a significant growth. And you see that videos even back to like some of the first video essays that they made can sometimes have about as many views as stuff that they're doing now, you know, depending on the level that they're at. And that is because there was that kind of retroactive push toward those older ones. Yeah,
and it's also,
so, you know,
I think as our friend Thor High Heels mentioned once, you just kind of make shit until it becomes good. But those first few videos are... like, you have to make them. You have to make the first few pieces of stuff for your channel or whatever. And you just have to accept, like, okay, it might not be great. It might not age well. This might not be something that I look back fondly on in 5 years because I didn't know what the hell I was doing at this time. I mean, already for me, like, my early stuff, I'm like, I can't even watch that anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
There's definitely something to be said for, like, you know, just keep working away at what you're doing and kind of honing your stuff. And when that pop off does happen, there will be people who appreciate your backlog and everything.
And I would generally say that when you're in that stage, the best thing you can do is find a community of people that you respect a lot and who are on a similar level than you, rather than necessarily hoping for something from someone who's a lot bigger. Or, you know, on the flip side, just kind of posting your stuff out onto the void on places like Reddit. Obviously, you know, those things are still, like, you know, we've all done it. It can be a little bit of a push early on, but like finding a community of people that are going to mutually benefit one another, and who you like just sort of artistically and emotionally agree with is more important than anything. And I know that that's even sometimes easier said than done, but you know.
I mean, actually, honestly, this rolls into something I always like to, I guess, generally ask, which is, you know, for people who are starting out, who are wanting to either, say, make music or do videos or just even write or whatever, I always like to ask, you know, do you have any tips to give people who are in sort of that beginner stage, who are just starting out?
It's gonna feel really unnatural at first for almost everybody. There are definitely people for whom it comes very naturally, but it can feel very alien. You know, like when you watch a fucking baby walk for the first time, they almost seem kind of shocked by what they're doing. And I think it kind of applies there as well. It just feels like, oh, this is not coming together the way that I thought it was. Like, my hands aren't moving the way my brain is telling them to, you know, the words aren't coming out the way I hear them in my head. And you kind of just need to compromise your brain needs to compromise with your hands, essentially. And I mean that both for music and for making video stuff. I was talking to somebody recently who was asking for some advice, and the way that I put it is like, you really can't get good at making video scripts by making video scripts and not taking them to narration and editing and uploading. You kind of need to complete the process and have something that is complete before you can look back at it finished and go, oh, this kind of line read doesn't really work, or this way that I've phrased this sentence doesn't feel right in narration. And I think those are the things that you can start to use. You know, you can kind of assess the flow of things, and all of those things feed back into how you might wind up writing your scripts. And I don't think that you can, like, you kind of need that not forward momentum, but that just sort of like perpetual motion that comes from completing something and then going, okay, cool, now I know how I can apply this to the next one over and over before it starts to feel a little bit more natural. Like, this is kind of a smaller point, but when I write scripts, I have a lot of notes all throughout it that dictate how I want it to be edited, where I want pauses to go, where might be natural places for ad breaks, what might be good places to start and stop songs. You know, these are all just things that start to come to somebody the more you do something, and it becomes more natural and you start to be able to do it, if not faster, more efficiently, if that makes sense. So be prepared for it to be kind of uncomfortable, and know that it's usually worth pushing through that. And if you find that, you know, you feel compelled to do it, even if you maybe necessarily didn't like the act of doing it, because I think that can feel very contradictory, I think it's worth it to keep trying. Yeah,
I think that's great advice. Just get out there and sort of try to make something from beginning to end, and just actually put it out in the world. And that's like the best first step. Because I know for me, that's basically more or less what I did. I kind of had done stuff on and off, and then eventually I was just like, I'm going to commit to making like a full video.
Yeah, so what do you think was the kind of like breaking point for you, so to speak?
Oh, of what got me into it?
Yeah, like what kind of made it a thing that you do regularly?
Trying to remember,
you know?
what it was that I first talked about. It was either, no, I think it was Blair Witch, and then it was followed by 35mm. And the thing more than anything was that I found this random game that I particularly liked, and nobody really cared about it. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody looked at it very fondly. It was just sort of a side note of like, here's a tie-in game for this property that's hot right now or whatever. And it just felt like it was overlooked. And I don't know, I just kind of was like, you know, I kind of dig this little thing, this weird little game. I kind of want to talk about it, and so I just sort of decided to make a thing about it and sort of bring it into the limelight. And more or less it was the same with 35mm, which Blair Witch, at least like another human being, has heard about. 35mm is like this weird game that I got on a recommendation from like one friend 3 years ago. And I thought it looked cool, and you were like walking around with a little camera in it, and I was like, this looks kind of like a sweet game. I'd be into this, just walking around this big foresty environment taking pictures. And it turned out to be a very different game than I thought, but I liked it nonetheless. So for me, it was mostly just honestly like, I found these items that I thought were really interesting and I thought deserved to be almost cataloged in a way.
Right.
And so that's kind of why I started doing it.
Yeah.
Which actually also brings me into another thing that I wanted to ask you, because me and you both tend to have a habit of covering things that I wouldn't say are necessarily always lost media, but generally they tend to be lesser talked about items. items that are typically like at most maybe a footnote in somebody's career that nobody really pays attention to and stuff like that. So I feel like me and you in particular run into situations where there will be, a topic or like a game or in your case, a show where it's like, oh, I know this thing exists, but it's very hard to track down, and tracking it down is a whole process. And like, we basically, what I'm trying to get at is essentially with what we do, which is finding these sort of more obscure, more rare items. I always kind of feel in the back of my head like not only am I making a video, but in some ways I'm also actually I'm actually talking about this thing that nobody would ever, even think about otherwise, right? Biggest example for me is Darkest of Days. That game does not exist anywhere. It is gone. The files are gone. There is no way to get that game unless you find like a physical 360 copy, which you're probably not going to find in 2022. So I'm curious because I was also watching your video about the almost lost anime that you did recently.
Yeah, alright, so good luck.
Yes, yeah. And I sort of had the thought like, with what we do, I'm in a weird spot where I'm working on some videos right now where there are items in there that are games that basically don't exist on the internet. I had to find them in like the corners of the internet and they just don't exist. So I'm curious on what your thoughts are on like the preservation of stuff like this, and like how much weirdos like us who are like the only people that seem to care should actually be doing to preserve this stuff, and like what the proper methods are, because like I'm genuinely curious because I have a few like literal EXEs on my desktop that I'm like, I don't think these exist anywhere, and I kind of want to put them somewhere.
I think in my case, it's kind of an interesting gap where, like, number one, there are always more people who know and think about these things than you expect, right? I'm working on it's kind of in creative limbo because it's really hard to research on this note. I've got a video planned on some really obscure homebrewed Game Boy Advance ports, conversion software of a lot of really seminal visual novels, Eroge in particular. A lot of this stuff is really hard to find information on, and there's a language barrier. And at first when I went into this, I was like, I just fucking stumbled across this. How many people actually know about it? And in kind of poking around, like, there are a lot of people from all sorts of, like, who speak all sorts of different languages who know about this. It's not quite as like it's not just me and like a sea of people like otaku who like barely remember it, so there is almost kind of like a little bit of reassurance that something can only be like so forgotten. That was why it was insane when I found Arisa Good Luck, because, I recently checked out the most recent expanded edition of the Anime Encyclopedia, which is an extremely thorough text. It is like, no joke, like thousands of pages, I think, at this point. It's a big book. It's currently at 5,000 pages. I just opened up my PDF.
That's a lot.
Or at least, no, maybe that's exaggerating, because I think these pages are laid out wrong. I think it's like 1,200 or something like that. But at any rate, it's not even in there. And they've got stuff that to me seems almost more obscure. That one felt really extreme, and even then, it had been uploaded before, too terribly long. And then on top of that, it didn't take me long to find a VHS copy of something related to it that was lost, and then the DVD itself. So like, you know, a lot of it winds up being lost in the sense that you don't have immediate access to it, but not like impossible to find. So in cases like that, I think that it's not necessarily cause to be less like, you know, dedicated or less immediate about trying to preserve it, but more reassuring that it probably is out there somewhere, and that if it can't be found now, it probably will be eventually if the right person takes on that task. But as far as figuring out how to talk about these things, I always tend to err on the side of, you know, it's, if I'm not going to talk about this kind of thing, who is, in the case of those GBA ports, I know that there are other people who've like done write-ups about them and stuff, so I don't mean to say that I'm like some like fucking like messiah for lost media or whatever, but like YouTube is obviously a platform that's very driven by mutual understanding, shall we say, when it comes to topics. Like, oh, okay, here's this thing that I know and like, I want to watch this video. I don't know what the fuck this is about. Why would I watch a video on it, you know? So it's almost kind of a theoretical, like not a very good investment to like lean into these things that nobody knows or gives a shit about. Unless obviously you know the way to pitch it to people, which I think I've gotten pretty okay at. So I think like with it not necessarily being something that is as incentivized as like, you know, talking about more like mainstream, popular, beloved stuff, I kind of almost have all the deeper compulsion to cover it and give it the attention that it deserves, just because like, you know,
yeah,
it just kind of feels right, I guess.
That's kind of sort of more or less the approach I've been taking ever since a lot of my most recent stuff, I've tried to go into more of a background on like, hey, what did the company do before this? What happened to them after? And if possible, you know, get sort of insight on what is going on inside the studio. I've explained it as attempting to sort of do something akin to NoClip, but for Slav jank games that like nobody, you know, they have their own little dedicated communities, but aside from that, it's like most people really haven't taken the time to make like a video or like a comprehensive background and history for these little things.
Yeah.
They're just these things that are released into the world, and then like their company dies and it's just not really cataloged because it doesn't even make so much of a blip on the radar. And I feel like, interestingly enough, like particularly anime and manga have that similar issue that a lot of games do, where it's just like with games there's just so many, and there's so many of these small companies that'll pop up, release like one thing, and then they'll just go away, and then that will no longer be on storefronts, and it's just gone unless you manage to have either an original copy or you manage to emulate it. So yeah, I always find I've kind of gone back and forth of just like, you know, part of me is like, should I put these files somewhere people can get? Should I not? You know, if the company is technically dead already, does it even matter? But it's definitely an interesting conversation where it's just like, you know, it's one thing to bring a spotlight to this stuff and be like, hey, this thing is really cool, but it's another thing to then also, I guess, actually archive it somewhere. And I always kind of go back and forth with myself on where I should go with that, and like if I should just actually start doing an archive of some things.
The thing about it is, you know, the worst thing that can happen is somebody reaches out or somebody, you know, flexes their copyright over it, and they just say, hey, like, no. And then that's your answer.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, I am, I think, probably maybe even a little bit more inclined toward archival and preservation beyond, like, the kind of good grace of where copyright law stands, then maybe I even should be at the level that I'm at. I'm kind of like, I figure again, like, it's you're not going to be able to ask for permission.
Yeah.
But you're not even going to have to beg for forgiveness if there's some kind of problem in the end, you know?
That's absolutely true.
When it comes to putting stuff on archive,
yeah,
obviously.
Yeah. All right, well, rolling off of that, you mentioned it's sort of kind of in that process, your sort of process for writing. Or you mentioned it in that comment somewhere, you mentioned the process for writing. And I wanted to revisit that just because it's always something that interests me, just to hear how other people write, sort of what their process is and how they do stuff. So I guess first off, and you did kind of mention this before, in like your most recent video, the concept of, you know, how you go about picking a topic. So instead of just asking, you know, how do you pick one? I guess the question I'm more curious on is, when do you know you've picked the right one? Right.
I think a lot of time I know that a video is worth pursuing if I have a good title. There are definitely times where I just don't have a good title, but I know I have a good topic. And that can feel almost a little like weird to pursue. I'll still do it. Like with the Ari Said Good Luck video, I wasn't really sold on a title until it was time to upload. And there have been plenty of other videos where that's the case. The video that I did compiling a whole bunch of OVAs, I changed the title like a few minutes into it going live because I realized that the one I had sucked. You know? So it's not just, you know, having a strong title. I think I'm at a point where I really need to be grabbed by something, especially lately. You know, if a topic isn't really grabbing my attention, that's kind of a bigger red flag than whether or not I think it's going to do well, if that makes sense. I kind of just go with my gut, which makes it sound like simpler than it is, but obviously, like, you know, I pay a pretty close attention to what things seem to work and what seem to not work within these kinds of fields. Not even just with like anime YouTube, because I don't really watch very many anime YouTube channels except for like well, Coffee's one of the only, I'll say, but I don't even know if Coffee would call himself predominantly an anime YouTuber.
At this point, he's accepted his fate, as we found out in the last one of these we did. He slowly accepted the fact he is now an Annie-tuber.
But yeah, I kind of keep a fairly keen eye, I like to think, on how certain things work. Sorry, I think I kind of lost my own train of thought a little bit. I guess just like if something is compelling me, you know, it's going to get done eventually. I have a few videos that are like predominantly researched, or like the majority of the research has been done, but I'm just kind of stalling on actually putting the scripts together because my focus is on other things. There are videos where I have a really clear idea of what I'm going to say, and I know that I just need to do the research to make sure that my hunch is right, and, you know, I'll change accordingly if that proves not to be the case. But I just haven't started that yet. You know, I have videos whose scripts are outlined and are just kind of on hold. You know, I have scripts that are like halfway written. It just kind of depends on what's currently grabbing my attention and what feels right. So that tends to be how it comes together.
That totally makes sense for me. I sort of actually can relate to what you mean by it's sort of being a feeling. Because I've had a few videos now where like I'll write the script And at first I'm really into it, and then just the more I stare at it, I'm just like, I don't think I like this. I got to the point of like voicing a script recently even. That was like a whole hour and a half. And I just wasn't happy with it. And no matter how much I kept rewriting it and doing things and changing it, I just, like, I did sort of the opposite thing you do, where, you know, you had a title, and that's normally how you can help figure out, like, what's going to be real good, or what's, what can help you focus. But for me, you know, I had a title I was really happy with, and I just couldn't put together cohesive thoughts that kind of like matched with that.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason I've gone so long without uploading is I scrapped a video that took me like 2 months to research. I read like a bunch of fucking books. I took like really extensive notes on the stuff I was planning on talking about. I did a lot of auxiliary research. And then I just hit a wall where I was like, this video is killing me. I fucking hate working on it. It is too stressful for me to work on. So I just kind of killed it. And, you know, that just kind of happens sometimes. You kind of have to face that sometimes that's going to be like a loss, you know? Yeah, so I definitely relate to that. And I think that what's important for people listening who are maybe struggling with that as well is that I think you also kind of need to at the same time recognize that not being happy with what you are working on can come from a lot of different perspectives. And I think you kind of need to develop a sense for when you're not happy with it because it's just not working, or because it's not grabbing you enough that you can make something that you like out of it. Or if you're having that reaction because you're just kind of out of your wheelhouse and it feels weird. Or if you are, you know, self-conscious for any number of other reasons.
Yeah, I definitely have that when I work on mine, and like the longer I work on a thing, that definitely is in the back of my head. But there's like there's like a different feeling between that and like, this isn't working. Just calling it quits, because I guess it's also because I've kind of, you know, we both kind of have done this for a while at this point, and it's kind of, it sucks to say this to people who are, you know, new or starting, but a lot of this is just instinctual. It's that same reason that, you know, when like a topic is good, you get that gut feeling that like, oh, this is really good, I can turn this into something, and like you're inspired. It's sort of the same thing, like if you just get a feeling, if you know like this is going nowhere, you know, I've done rewrites, and like you mentioned earlier, getting to the point of doing voiceover. Because, like, the script I was working on, I was happy with the writing. And then I got to the voiceover stage, and just, I didn't like any of it. Just none of it flowed. It felt like a chore to even record, and I just wasn't having fun at any point. And at some point, I just realized, like, I don't think I like anything I have written here at all. And so I just had to call it quits. You got to know when to call it quits. You can't just keep digging yourself that hole.
Yeah.
But kind of hand in hand with the process of sort of what you use to pick up, or like a topic or anything, I'm curious about what your process is in terms of actually writing. Because I know with your topics, you tend to do a lot of research, and I'm always curious as to like what it is, or how it is you go about your research, because the amount of effort and research you put into your videos, and like weird little obscure things you pull out of nowhere, is it is something to be admired.
Thank you. Well, first things first, I'm kind of an organizational pervert, but not in a way that really makes sense to everybody else. So I think for the sake of like not like making you all peer into what looks like the fucking Voynich manuscript, I'm going to kind of be a little bit more general about like how I outline things. But I do outline really extensively. I know a lot of people will write a first draft and then a second draft, you know, et cetera, until they get something where they want it to be.
That's more or less how I do
but,
it.
my first draft is usually a bunch of really extensively like notes that I've arranged into roughly the order that I want them to be in. Sometimes, whole paragraphs will come to me fully formed and I'll just need to jot it down, and then I'll stick that somewhere in my like bevy of notes. And then I'll go back through, like, usually it'll take me a whole day to take notes that I've taken in just like the order that I've watched things and researched things. And then it'll take me like a full day to go in and sort through all of that and then have an outline that I can then basically like rewrite in a way that makes more sense. So yeah, it's a lot of really extensive note taking. I've gotten into the habit of writing down more timestamps, or like what episodes things happen in, as I'm writing stuff. It's a little bit harder when I'm talking about games. I'll tend to just kind of be like, yeah, I was on this stage when blank cool thing happened, or what have you. So it's a lot of stuff like that. Just kind of trying to be really thorough with the thoughts that I'm having as I have them, so that, sometimes jokes or points that I really want to make just kind of don't make their way into a script, and you kind of need to be able to throw that stuff out. So when I am thorough enough, I have enough there that, if I cut one thing, it's not like I have to like rewatch something in order to kind of fill in that gap, but that is generally how I do it. I also get into the habit of reading stuff aloud before I record it, to my lovely wife, who's extremely patient, and that can almost kind of act as a draft process in itself, kind of making sure that things actually feel right to say out loud. And that way, it also just makes recording voiceover easier for me, because I've kind of associated the actual intonation that I'm going for in the script when it comes time to actually record. Like, I've kind of gotten that part out of the way, so I don't need to figure out how I'm going to say something while I'm recording. Yeah. So it's a lot of small things along the way that I try to do to make my life easier in later stages. Yeah, but generally I wouldn't necessarily say that that's like standard is using like a big bunch of notes and turning that into a script in like a very linear fashion.
Yeah. I definitely
linear after I've rearranged it, I mean.
Yeah, once you put it together and done the skeleton, yeah, so to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I do something similar where I'll take notes as I'm playing something, and then I'll just kind of write out ideas kind of as they come. Yeah, because I feel like that's just the way to go. If you have like a really good paragraph or so, I'll write something like that out, or I'll write like a thesis statement out, or whatever. Though granted, with a lot of my stuff, I'm just trying to cover stuff to bring a spotlight to it. Like I'm not necessarily right. The one video I did scrap was actually funny enough. I was like, I'm gonna do a wider topic. I'm gonna do like an actual video essay. And I was miserable. I hated it so much.
It's really hard.
It's incredibly hard.
Are you at liberty to talk about what exactly that was?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with talking about it in general. I tend to...
Just because I'm curious.
Yeah, I tend to be pretty open with my work. I don't really... I want to make this process kind of as transparent as possible, just because that's definitely kind of the person I am. So yeah, it was a video called Horrifying Beauty, and the topic was basically, it was more or less just talking about the aesthetics of horror and horror games in particular, right. Talking about the different, basically showing off more or less a bunch of cool different games with a bunch of cool, very interesting aesthetics, and talking also about how horror is kind of tied in with stuff like vibes and aesthetics and just like the general mood of a scene, and like you'll watch a horror movie and it'll be lit in a certain way, and it'll give off a certain type of feeling. It was more or less just a larger topic, talking about, kind of gushing about the beauty in a lot of different types of horror, because
Right.
more or less the thesis was there's a lot of beauty in the horror genre that is often looked over or ignored because people view horror as a spooky ghost jumping out of a screen and getting you or whatever, trying to jump scare you, or just being overtly gory for whatever reason. And I was trying to make something that was talking about it in a little bit more of a subtle way, which is very funny coming from me, considering some of the stuff I make.
Right.
But I was more like, it was kind of more or less just a passion thing, because I love horror. I like the aesthetic of horror. I love so much of horror, and I do think there is a lot of really, really brilliant pieces of art that are, considered horror, that I do think are like genuinely beautiful pieces of art, but are often looked over or regarded as lesser because they have that tag attached to them.
I find myself kind of being resistant to talk about this sort of thing, just because when something reaches this kind of cultural apex, it can often feel kind of short-sighted to like kind of make that like snap claim about it. But like, it's been interesting to see the kind of rise of what people are calling prestige horror,
the
almost kind of
horror.
create almost kind of create this weird hierarchy where like horror is getting reappraised as a genre, but like only the really classy ones. Whereas like, a lot of my favorite horror movies and the ones that speak to me the most, either on like a visceral emotional level or just on like a filmmaking level, are often the ones that were clearly made on like dog shit budgets by people who didn't really understand, maybe not what they were doing, but like who didn't really understand like the gravity that it was going to have on other people, rather than these like kind of very refined like film school, like, very put together movies that like their mission statement is to kind of say something, or to be something.
That's kind of partially what I was hoping to cover. The more or less the idea that all horror is art that is worth looking at and engaging with. It doesn't need to be elevated in order for it to be something that's worth engaging with. But like, I still one day might revisit it. I truly might, once I've found a way to word it all out in a way I like. But the main reason it fell through is I was just unhappy with basically every iteration of it. I wrote 3 separate scripts for that, just complete rewrites from scratch, and just none of them I was able to find the words to. It's a topic that I care so much about that it's hard to put into words and
that
not
can
be like
really
a crazy
make
person.
Things harder. Yeah, there's kind of a bell curve where things get harder. You're right.
Yeah, that's the issue I had with it, is there were just too many tangents where I would go off about some random thing, because I love this stuff. I love horror. And I think it's a genre that is, it has so much to offer people, but you just have to be willing to, 1, engage with it, and not view it as lesser, and 2, you gotta look for the good stuff, the stuff that actually is doing something interesting or is cool or is fun in a lot of ways. I don't buy into the idea that only elevated horror can be art. I think it's quite silly. I was recently...
and I think that it's not even necessarily that people are really pushing this idea, but that there's kind of like almost like a new hegemony within horror that really like is only interested in appraising these like new titles that are that tick a certain amount of boxes and are kind of just like not even pushing the other ones aside, but just like not even looking at their direction. It's not even aware that they exist, rather than trying to like outwardly exclude them from the conversation.
I almost think of it the same way as we've kind of talked about this before. You made an entire video about it, but a lot of animators or even manga artists get their start drawing more or less just porn, and that's something that is done, but often it's regarded by so many people as just being porn, essentially, just being filth. But a lot of those works are stuff that are more or less just like weird passion projects that somebody funded, and like there's porn shots between plot, but then there's also this other stuff. Like that's what happened with Fate. I forget what other. I know it's one you've mentioned to me before.
Fucking all of them. Yeah. All of them. Every single one of those early visual novels were also eroge because like they had to be. To the point where like a lot of those works, even like among otaku in Japan who are generally more willing to accept the pornographic elements as a part of the whole, will point to games like Air and go like, yeah, those are mismatched. Get those out of here. They clash. They clash with what we're going for here. Yeah. What we're coming to this for.
I view horror as more or less in that same sort of space where it's just like, to most people, for looking in from the outside, it's just that specific spot is just viewed as something that's like it's not artistic enough to be worth engaging with. I think
like it's also frustrating because I say like that a lot of these developers felt obligated, but even if they didn't and they just wanted to make some porn that also had like a broader plot, like that's fine too. Yeah. There's a lot of value in that. It's not hard to look past that if that's not what you're there for, and to see all of the other things that these have going for them, if that's something that you're willing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see here. I'm trying to look at my list here. All right. Well, I mean, for the most part, actually, there is one more thing, one sort of larger thing that I want to mention here.
Sure.
Or that I want to ask, I guess here. And that is, I always like to ask sort of what people's. If you had, unlimited time, unlimited budget, and could just cover whatever the hell you want, you have any like dream things you just love to truly like look into or research? I guess in your case, like you actually do have some of that funding and some of that ability to focus all day on that stuff.
I am lucky that I can have a budget a little bit for the research for what I do. There's a video in particular where that really came in clutch, and it would not have been possible if I didn't have the means to acquire things that are readily available on places like Yahoo Auctions Japan that just aren't online otherwise. But to actually answer your question, I think if I had kind of an unlimited budget to do whatever, I would probably make a film.
That's fair.
I've got a few ideas.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I would do much the same. I feel like
like I don't necessarily consider myself somebody for whom, and I think it's totally fine that this is where some people stand, right? More like doing something like a video essays or like doing like soundtracks for things, or the means to an end for doing something that they're more passionate about on the side. I'm really lucky that I can say that I really am passionate about what I'm doing in this space, and that I think I would still be doing it if I was making a living doing something else, or if I had the means to do something like, I don't know, like making a film, or if music was like a full-time thing for me. I think that it's being able to kind of share these things and tell these stories and kind of uncover this history is something that I'm just kind of plainly passionate about. So I feel really lucky in that respect, but it would be cool if I had the means to do that, or to commission an animated music video for a song of mine.
That would also be very cool. I'm much the same way. If I had that type of thing, I absolutely would be. Me and Mayor Muda, our good friend, we've have constantly, more or less back and forth, had a chat about dumb ARG shit, because we are both insane, and we both really like analog.
I've heard a little bit
stuff.
about it. I've heard a little bit about one of these.
So, like, May's got her own that she wants me to do, but, I feel like if me and her were both, we had budget, we had time, we would absolutely just devise some, like, Marble Hornets. Shit, we would just devise some internet ARG thing, because we're both just people who like that kind of thing. But, like, I also, it's lesser really talked about, but I actually do like to film stuff. Like I genuinely love to. I used to love it more, but I used to love like doing photography and taking videos and stuff like that. And during the pandemic, that passion unfortunately kind of went away. But it is returning, and I want to include more of it. But I'm also at a point where it's like I want to balance making these videos and also, including my own little stylish things on them, with also not like just doing like a 5-minute channel awesome skit at the start of my videos,
That is a back pocket idea that I have had for a long time. Is like someday it's going to feel right for me to do a parody of that. You gotta and I know that Hazel. Everybody else does it at least once. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I gotta like badly green screen in a friend of mine who, whoa, I can't believe you're here, DEMENZA'S Gate. Like I sure am. Listen, I'm coming here from the future.
Yeah, I'm coming here for the you have to play this really shitty game to save the world.
Yeah. The only thing you can do to save the world is to play this Euro game.
Wonderful. That would be great. I would do that if I had unlimited time and budget. I would drive on over to Doug Funnyman's warehouse that he filmed stuff in, and I would just film all the episodes in there. That
exactly.
seems great. Though the fact he didn't rent it out to his friends is probably a bad indicator. I don't think he'll rent it out to me.
Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. I could get lucky. That's pretty cool though. The idea of just like doing a film straight out. That's honestly, like, if I could do that, I absolutely would. And it would not be related to my channel or any of that crap at all. I just make like an actual movie.
It's funny because I've kind of joked inside of my own head that this particular idea that I have is almost sort of like my like ultimate thesis statement almost. Like I know that's a really grandiose way to put it, but the kind of things about it I've been thinking about feel like things that I really want to convey that I don't think can be like persuasive in a format other than something narrative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that absolutely does.
Not that my core goal is to like prove something to people or whatever, but just that, like, when you think about films as a vehicle for empathy, I think that is almost kind of the final frontier, shall we say, for this particular thing that I feel strongly about that just hasn't really come up directly in any videos I've made.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I'm the same way in that I more or less kind of want to do something akin to that as well. It's just separated, but explores themes that I can't talk about really in any video, but I still nevertheless feel strongly about, But that's why it's a dream project.
Yeah.
But before we sort of start the process of wrapping up, I'm curious. What have you been reading and watching lately?
That's a good question. My wife and I have been watching a lot of the anime this season. A lot of really, really good stuff. We're watching like actually 8 different shows.
I've been kind of watching a few myself as well.
Yeah. What have you been watching?
I've been on the Spy Family train.
Oh, gotcha.
Family.
That's one of the ones I'm not
Spy
watching.
Family's
actually
pretty fun. They've introduced a new character who's very fun. It's just a fun little. It's just a fun, no strings attached, kind of goofy little cartoon show. And you know what?
Yeah.
I want that right now. There's nothing about it that's particularly like it's not gonna wow you at all. It's literally just like a fun comedy gag show, and I'm into that. Right now I think was a good time for it, and so I got in there. I've also been watching. I watched the first episode of Mob Psycho, of course, which was fantastic. And then I of course dipped into that cyberpunk anime. Great show. That one's really good. Can't stress enough how that's like maybe Trigger's best show in the last few years.
Yeah, I've been hearing that a lot.
It's they had a chance to do BNA again, and they just decided to do it good this time. is what cyberpunk is.
Yeah.
They had a lot of budget, and they sure did a lot with it. It's great. It's wonderful. And I don't like hate BNA or anything, but Trigger is generally
I know a lot of
style
people
over
who
substance.
do. I haven't seen it.
It's just, it's the typical Trigger thing of style over substance, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I think their style works a lot better with stuff like Promare, where it's like an hour-long movie that is contained, and they don't have time to talk about the world or the lore.
They sure did in Promare, though. You gotta give them that. They sure found a way to put their foots in their mouths.
They did, but because it's only an hour, they can only do so much. It's not something like Keys and Iver, where like 90% of the show is just like, here's the lore of the universe. And like 10% is something actually interesting happening. Like that, I feel like a lot of their shows tend to go between one or the other, where they'll either spend too much time explaining the environment around them and trying to rationalize it. Like even Kill la Kill, once it starts to get into like the world and lore stuff, it's just kind of like, let's maybe go back to the girls battling each other.
God, I've seen so little of their catalog.
It's a lot of it is hit or miss, but I still love Trigger.
Yeah.
They know how to make a thing look pretty.
Yeah. It's funny, there's actually not very much crossover in the stuff that we're watching, it sounds like. Because I'm watching like a lot of the like anime girls hanging out stuff this season.
Yeah, that's fair.
Fucking Pop Team Epic and some smaller stuff like fucking Bocchi the Rock I'm really enjoying. It's kind of a slice of life about girls who are in a band.
Oh, that also sounds very... Wait, I think not that one, but I feel like I've heard somebody...
It's invariably going to get a lot of K-On! Comparisons. I can't really say the fundamental ways in which it is different from K-On! Without having seen more of it. But I'd say there's more of an emphasis on like the kind of dynamics of being a musician and being in a band and working with other people. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so that actually sounds pretty nice. I'd probably be into that if that's the case. More of the technical, because I really liked Hazel for that exact reason. I love how much of
kind of getting into the process.
Yeah, I love how much
art.
of it was about the process of creating stuff. Like it really encapsulated the feel of just like, I'm making something. We're making something together.
Yeah.
Here's the whole process. It's not always pretty, but this is the process of making it.
Yeah. I haven't really been reading much. I've kind of been in sort of a manga lull right now. I kind of go through phases where different mediums appeal to me more than others, kind of fit into what I'm doing more. But I have been playing a fucking shit ton of Guilty Gear. At first it was just for fun, and now it is for a fairly inevitable video.
Hella. Are you you've been playing through all of them, right?
All of them.
So you got to Guilty Gear 2,
not every revision of every game.
You got to 2, right? You got to Overture.
Yeah, I'm like 6 missions away from finishing 2.
How Overture pilled are you? Because I fucking love it.
Right? I fucking love it.
So
good.
It's wonderful.
It's so good. Yeah. Just for the sake of being like able to get through it a little bit faster, I've turned on the thing where it does like the RTS stuff for you. But I also kind of like that and how it mixes with like the like 3D action stuff, which like it's cracked, dude. Like the ways in which they actually managed to transport a lot of Guilty Gear's core fighting mechanics into this like 3D beat 'em up environment is insane.
Yeah.
Like the fact that there's still this really big emphasis on combos, because you attack way less efficiently if you just do like a 3-hit combo on an enemy, because you can't hurt them when they're knocked down. You have to extend your combos so that you can kill them in one shot and move on to the next guy and make faster work of it. And then there are just like all of these other like smaller things that they've brought in. Like there's still air dashing, even though there's like a jump button now, which is fucking cracked. And then there's like, they have like bursts essentially just like under a different name, and it's like so painfully canon. It's great. I love it.
I adore Guilty Gear 2, and when you mentioned you were playing it, I was very happy, because I'm one of the weirdos who like actually unironically adores that game. It's like it has issues, and like it's flawed in so many ways. It is a weird game in so many ways. It's got so many things it's trying to do, but I adore that. You know, that's kind of always a through line with most of the stuff I cover. I adore things that just swing for the fences, and Guilty Gear 2 is just, like, I'm gonna make an RPG.
Yeah, the insane thing about Guilty Gear is that when people talk about how a lot of the non-mainline games are bad, what they're leaving out is that they're literally all bad in like the weirdest, most charming ways. Like, I don't know if you've played Isuka. That game feels like it was designed as like a proof, like what is the opposite of a proof of concept? Like a disproof of concept. Like they were trying to make a game that was as antithetical to what core Guilty Gear was as possible. It feels like somebody in the dev staff made it to like fucking like school somebody else who was like, well, what if we turned it into a beat 'em up? Like they were like, here's the worst possible way to make that happen. It's mesmerizing. How could you hate it? There's a button to turn.
Yeah. I need to play some of the other like spin-offs and stuff, but I've always been fascinated with 2. In the same way I'm fascinated with, I think it's called Shonen Monks, the Mortal Kombat spin-off. That is like a weird little 3D action game as well.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just
yeah.
I just adore weird little spin-offs that are just completely different than anything else in the franchise.
Yeah.
And Guilty Gear 2 was one that I played like way back when. That like, yeah, it's people are in a way sort of right in saying that it's bad, but it's not bad in the way that you think it would be bad. It's not
right.
bad. It's just bizarre. It's just put together in such a bizarre, like every choice is such a weird choice for it, and it's just like god damn. I appreciate it trying.
For so many of those spin-offs I've gone from like my first note will be like, holy shit lol, this is unplayable, and then by the end of my play session with it I'll be like, I think I love this. Like I think I love that it exists.
That's the way to go.
Because like so much of even like the core Guilty Gear games are like, how does this work? This shouldn't work. None of these things should work in conjunction with one another, but somehow it does. So these side games feel like these proving grounds where it's like, that didn't work, that didn't work, that especially didn't work, so on and so forth.
I think it's also that the main creator of Guilty Gear, he's always cared way more about the story than the actual, like... Right. Granted, Guilty Gear as a franchise, every single one of those fighting games are immaculate. They're some of the best put together fighting games that have ever existed. However, you can clearly tell...
I don't know. Did you play Guilty Gear 1?
I sure have. Maybe not that one, but hey, that's the same with like Street Fighter as well. Street Fighter 1 is
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You can definitely feel with Guilty Gear, and the more you play them, I don't know how if you've like played all of them already or what, but once you get into like... No,
I'm still waiting on my copy of Exurd.
Yes, Exurd is where you start to... I feel like it happened before Exurd, but Exurd I think is like the most obvious, where the story mode is literally just a 12-episode anime. Same exact
Right,
runtime.
right.
He's just made an anime now with Guilty Gear, and
I'm really looking forward
it's
to it, especially
wonderful.
knowing that like Rev 2 has its own story mode. Yeah,
There's two separate.
I'm
it's
looking forward
basically
to
two
seeing.
seasons of the same show. It's wild.
Yeah,
It's complete. It's buck wild. It's basically Subspace Emissary, except there's like no combat at all. It's just straight dialogue, just straight up an anime
I can't
show.
wait.
Like it's bizarre. I
can't
love
wait.
it. He wants to make a TV show so bad. Somebody please let him make a TV show.
Yeah. I'm really excited. I'm really fucking excited for the last stretch of games. I'm really excited to make it because. Do you want to know the whole reason why I did this fucking insane thing? So I was like, okay, you know what? I don't want to spend like fucking $80 on Strive and it's like season pass. Because I know that with fighting games, a lot of the time I get started, I go into training mode, I fuck around with it, and I'm like, okay, I've had my fill. I'm not going to do that this time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the mainline games so I can get caught up with the stories and get familiar with the characters and understand like the culture around it. And then if I manage to get through all of those without falling off of it, then I will allow myself to buy Strive.
That's
Because I want to save money that way. I've had to buy way more of these games than I expected. It's for a video, so it's fine. It's fine.
I relate
but
to this
I think
on
it's
an
really
incredible
funny how
level.
much that plan not necessarily backfired, but wound up in the most opposite scenario than I expected.
You've become Guilty Gear pilled.
Yeah. Well, that was my hope. My secret hope all along was to get Guilty Gear pilled.
Yeah, now you
just,
can mention the backyard in one of your videos and have people lose their absolute goddamn minds. Do you even know about the backyard yet? Probably not.
Yeah, it comes up in Overture.
Okay, it does.
For the first time. It's like the crux of Overture's plot.
Yeah, the backyard is wild.
Yeah.
the lore of Guilty Gear gets insane.
And somehow I'm like, yes, of course.
It's
the Crusades.
it's wonderful.
Frederick.
Kingdom Hearts, eat your heart out. I adore it, so I'm very happy to hear that. Maybe once you get to Strive, we can we can play some of that, and I can get my ass
I want to
kicked.
play Strive with all of my friends.
I would absolutely play Strive.
It is so, like, I didn't realize how many friends of mine are into Guilty Gear already. I didn't realize that this was going to be a thing that could actually wind up being a social experience. Like, I'm so fucking stoked for that. I want to blast through the last few games so I can get right to it.
Strive, I think, really brought a lot of that back, because Exerd was it was very widely regarded as like the sweaty fighting game for a very long time. It's where the people who were like really
that makes sense.
cracked at fighting games
Yeah.
would go.
That makes
Strive,
sense.
I think, was they toned it down just enough that it managed to, I think, go back into the mainstream. But yeah, Guilty Gear has always had sort of a reputation as sort of being like the cracked fighting game. Like, you play Guilty Gear if you want something really, really technical and hard to master and super in-depth.
Which isn't even necessarily why I'm there. Like, the thing that I really like about Guilty Gear so far is that playing with people who are around my level, I can be comfortable not knowing all of my characters' moves and what scenarios they're best in at all times. Like, I can be comfortable just kind of throwing myself at it and having a good time and not caring about like having the most optimal movement or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, it's
still fun because it's a game that's so geared towards just making cool shit happen.
Yeah, the vibes are immaculate. The music is incredible. Overture has
it's got Blue Water Blue Sky.
What's up?
It's got Blue Water, Blue Sky. You can't beat a franchise that has Blue Water, Blue Sky.
Have you gotten to the point where you've heard the That Man theme in 2?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, it's like one of my favorite pieces of music in a theme in a video game. But I believe it's closer to the final boss. But I adore it.
Right.
I've posted it a few times in places.
I'm gonna play more of it once we're done recording
hell
this, so
yeah.
maybe I'll see it.
But yeah, and anything else you want to mention? You know, recently playing or that you want to give like a recommendation for people to check out that you might not want to like cover in a video, but you still think is worth checking out.
I don't think so. I think my bases are pretty covered right now.
I'll give a general shout out to that Live Alive remaster. I just finished it.
I've watched a little bit of it. It seems really good.
If you have not played it or like seen it,
I've played the original.
Okay, so you played it to completion. You've like finished it.
I think I played about like half of it when I played it in high school.
Here's the thing, right? Guilty Gear, or not Guilty Gear. What am I saying? I'm so used to talking about it, but Live Alive.
I thought you were gonna make a. I thought there was gonna be a crazy comparison.
No. I was just so used to talking about Guilty Gear. I'm so happy to have another human being talk about 2 with me. That's not negative.
Yeah.
But with Live Alive, it went from like, this is a pretty good RPG. I really like this RPG. It does a lot of really interesting things. To like, it went from maybe like a 7 out of 10, let's just say, offhandedly. Though I don't really always like metrics because I think they're kind of silly. But regardless, let's say it was like a 7 out of 10. And then I got to the back half of that game. And then I got...
I know like the deal with the back half of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I got to like the sort of near the end. And it jumped from like that 7 to I think it might be the best JRPG I've ever played.
Holy shit. It
is so dramatically better. Like it skyrockets.
Well, you know what the scenario writer wound up working on after that, right?
What?
Mother 3.
Does not surprise me at all. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been trying to tell, because there's a lot of people I know who like started it and were like, yeah, it's pretty fun. That I'm just like, you should finish Live Alive because it jumps in quality like dramatically. Like it jumps up so substantially that it went from like, I really like this RPG to like where I'm at now is looking back at it, I'm like, that is one of the most impressive RPGs that has ever released, and it is wild how little it's talked about in the West.
Yeah.
Because it has so many ideas that, like, even today, nobody has done anything close to.
Yeah.
Very good game. Highly recommend that if you haven't checked it out, or if you've maybe checked it out but only played, like, a little bit of it. It's absolutely worth pushing out into the end. It improves so much. It does so many more interesting things once you get that far in. But that's my recommendation, at least. So we can start sort of wrapping up here. Before we go today, do you have any upcoming projects, any upcoming pieces of work, or just anything that you want to sort of give a tease for people here?
I am working on a video right now. I'm getting toward the end of the scripting phase that I've had on my to-do list for like a year and a half. So it's been stewing for a long time, and I'm finally pursuing it. So if it's not out by the end of October, that's okay. But I would like for it to be. So hopefully by the end of October, you'll get to see what I'm talking about.
Hell yeah. Well, it's been nice to have you. Before we head out here, why don't you let people know where they can find you, just in case they don't know.
Oh gosh. I'm on YouTube as just Hazel. I don't really know how one would search for me. But I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @afewbruises. And I think that's mostly it. Yeah. And as always, you can find me at DEMENZA'S at youtube.com. You can also go over to www.demenza'sgate.com. I still own that, and nobody can take it away from me. You can also follow me on Twitter, same name, DEMENZA'S. Pretty much have the same name on every platform.
So just find me somewhere in the wire. And yeah. But thank you so much for joining me today, Hazel. It's been nice just sitting down and chatting.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Again, being able to talk to another person about Guilty Gear 2 in a positive light. I'm really happy about the fact that you like it. Because I had a feeling you might.
I'm worried that my section on it is going to be the longest I talk about one game.
It absolutely
in my Guilty Gear
because
video.
Guilty Gear 2 gets so much shit. And some of it is deserved. But I just adore it. It's so weird. It's so interesting. It's so fun. But
it's great.
But yeah, thank you all for joining us today on Behind the Wires or Beyond the Wires. Oops, I said the wrong thing.
Within the wires,
Within the wires,
under the wires,
somewhere
in the vicinity of the wire,
somewhere
the wires,
around the wire. Yeah. But thank you so much for
in the ballpark of the wires.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully you'll join us again soon. Take care of yourself and stay safe out there on this spooky Halloween.